Not official, it wasn't created by Netflix, but the people who made it did make it seem legit. The starting price was 1 cent per coin. And almost immediately, people piled on, all rushing in and buying, expecting the value to go up so they could sell and make a quick buck. And sure enough, within a few days, it flew, all the way to $30 a coin. And within a week, managed to hit an all-time high of $2,800. To put this another way, if I'd spent just $50 on Squidcoin at the start, I'd have turned that 50 into 14 million. But then people realized something, that unlike with most cryptos, where you can buy and sell freely, if you wanted to convert your Squidcoin back to dollars, you had to play a game. And the game didn't exist. The developers had promised that they were working on it, but it very quickly became apparent that they weren't. And you've probably never seen anything like the fallout that came after this. Within 5 minutes of the scam being outed, 5 minutes, Squidcoin dropped from $2,800 to $0.00079. Or in other words, your sweet $14 million would become less than $4. It wasn't really a failure on the developers' end. They walked away with full pockets, and still, no one knows who they are thanks to the anonymity of crypto. But for the overeager investors who didn't do their research, they lost everything. A huge 9 out of 10 fail. But still not on the scale of number 1. And just before number 1, do remember that if your favorite fail isn't on this list, I do have a whole series of tech fails. I will link them after this one. Okay. We all love a revolution, don't we? When someone comes and says that they're going to completely redefine something, it's an easy thing to root for. Well, this is exactly what Dr. Ruja Ignatova capitalized on. She was a strong promoter of cryptocurrencies and how they take power away from the banks and give them to the people. But she felt like the current leading crypto, Bitcoin, just wasn't quite right. So, came up with OneCoin. Bigger, better, and easier to use. A revolution. She basically took the things that Bitcoin does, exaggerated them, and then made those the features of OneCoin. For example, Bitcoin payments take 10 minutes to arrive. OneCoin would take just 1 minute. And she seemed legit. She studied at Oxford, she had a PhD, a successful career, she was on the front page of Forbes. The Trustpilot reviews for OneCoin were overwhelmingly positive. People didn't have a reason to not believe her. So, money started pouring in. And I don't mean a few million, $15 billion worth of cash was invested by people all around the world. She got everyone from the richest to the poorest people investing in OneCoin. People sold their farms and their houses so they could be a part of it, and then she disappeared. One day in 2017, she was meant to be on stage speaking in Lisbon, and she just didn't show up. No one has seen her since. Because it turns out that OneCoin was actually a pyramid scheme. Ruja and the people she'd hired would travel around the world, brainwashing people into putting their cash into her currency, and then convincing them to get others on board. They'd created a system such that if an investor could get another investor on board, they would get a commission on that. And likewise, if that new investor could then get another investor on board, they'd get a commission too. So, OneCoin had an almost cult-like following. Everyone who was in it had a very strong incentive to make sure it succeeded. The slight complication being that OneCoin was not actually a proper cryptocurrency. Ruja said that the reason it was better than Bitcoin was because it was based on its own unique blockchain technology. Except, what that actually meant was, it wasn't blockchain at all. It's like me saying, oh, this iPhone costs $100, and that's because it's running on my own version of iOS, which isn't actually iOS. And as a result, you couldn't actually use OneCoin to buy anything. And this is presumably why Ruja disappeared. She knew that it would catch up to her eventually, and so she vanished before it did. What I think is really interesting about this case is that if you knew what you were looking for, the red flags were all there from the start. Her being on the front page of Forbes was actually fabricated to give her more credibility. The website was rife with grammatical errors, even in one instance spelling cryptocurrency with an I. All those Trustpilot reviews OneCoin had, they'd all been left in one single month. Fake reviews. People lost everything. This was a horrific fail on a scale that crypto had never seen before, and I hope we'll never see again. 10 out of 10.
Things I do for these videos.
To check out the last Nightmare Tech Fails, that video's here. Or to see some of the biggest tech that you've ever seen in your entire life, that video's here. This behind me is HMP Foss Way, and it's maybe the most technologically advanced prison in the world. So we're actually going to go through the full prisoner's journey, understand what the potential benefit of tech in a prison actually is, and then talk to... Prepare. This behind me is HMP Foss Way.
Before then, I have a ton of small projects I'd love to have done. Let's quickly run through the plan. I'm going to build a large smelter just beside my new auto storage. From there, I want as many small farms done as possible. I'm thinking netherwort, sea pickles, glowberry, glow lichen, coral fans, scoots, sniffers, cactus, tripstone, and multiple flower farms. And we only have about 60 in-game days to get all of that done. It's currently day 939 and I want to be finished and back here at spawn at the end. So let's go. This tunnel is going to be my exit to the auto storage that we built last episode. I'll make myself an exit tunnel that heads straight out this way. Just down to the left of that, I'm going to dig out an area for this super smelter to live. The control room will be at the same level as the storage floor, and most of it will then go below somewhere down here. We won't see the furnaces in the end, they'll be down here and I'll be up there. Let's start by digging out at least a 2-high tunnel all the way to the front door. It'll be an easy way in and out of the storage, and it'll tell us right away exactly where the entrance will be. And here we are, nearly exactly where I planned. Once we get this spawn-proof and safe, it'll be a nice exit from the storage. I'll widen it later to be able to fly in and out safely, and we'll have easy access to the nether and the rest of our city as well. Okay, onto this super smelter. I do need to clear some of the stone, so one quick beacon later, we can get started. So this is what it looks like coming down the storage hall. I'll wall off this little section so it won't look like this. And that's out to the real world. And then when I come around this corner, we're straight into the smelter control room. The smelter is 198 furnaces large, and items to be smelted are dropped in full shulkers down into the chest here. It's all powered by shulkers of fuel input from up here, and behind me is the output, which returns full shulkers of cooked items and empty boxes. On the wall are a bunch of manual furnaces, so I can use this room for small smelting projects as well. Let's quickly make a shulker of coal to power this. I can choose whichever fuel source I want and may change it later, but for now it's easiest to start with coal. It's time to test it out. We'll drop a shulker of sand into this chest here, and then that shulker of coal we just made into this side. We'll give those a second to get into the system, and then we can fire it up. This will almost definitely not be the last super smelter in this world. I have plans to build a much larger one if I keep surviving, but 200 furnaces will more than get us through for now. Back at the output, the glass finished in just a few minutes, and that's a huge quality of life upgrade, going from 3 manual furnaces, or the 60 manual furnaces at the Wither Skelly farm. This is a huge change. This is going to help a lot. The next farm I want to put together is a netherwort farm. Automatic netherwort farms still all require manual replanting, so I'm going to make it at least a bit of fun with minecart harvesting trips each time. If you were here for the auto storage last episode, you know I have a 16-stand potion brewer, and I'm going to need this netherwort soon to fill it all up. I want to collect the materials for the sea pickle farm while we're at it. Both farms will be done on the mushroom island and near each other. The sea pickles will be a great source of lime dye now that we have a super smelter. It will also be useful in some of the future technical farms I plan to make. The netherwort farm requires soul sand, and I ran out while building the hoglin farm, so I need to do just a little bit more piglin bartering. And it will never not be amazing to me how fast 200 piglins can trade 9 stacks of ingots. And they're done. Let's go build another netherwort farm. I have a lot to do, so I'm going to keep moving quickly through these farms. Next on the list is our Coral Fans farm. Coral Fans are extremely useful when you want to build almost anything that uses TNT duping. This farm is by Nicolier and won't take me long. I know this is spawn proof already, but I'd like to be able to see, so let's add some light here. And these chests hold, well, you guessed it, more bone meal. I didn't bring a lot, so we'll just dump in a little bit for now. And then around here is where I'll stand, so let's add one more light to the end of this. Now if I use this farm with shears, you'll see that all I get is seagrass. Good for turtle farm, bad for TNT. But if I use a silk touch pickaxe, I can collect the coral fans themselves. When I built the auto brewers, I thought about what potions I'd want in the system. One of the most underused but actually useful potions is a turtle master potion made with a turtle helmet. That requires a scoop farm. I also use a lot of turtle eggs in farms, so I thought putting a little turtle breeder next to this would be smart. While getting turtles to breed so I could bring some eggs home, I thought it was funny that I got my third trident in the world this easily. I was completely out of turtle eggs after projects like the gold farm took them all, so I needed at least a few of these to get the turtle farm started. I'm glad I'm never gonna have to do this in this world again. I spent so much time on this beach. Turtle eggs are good for a lot of farms. We've had about 20 in the gold farm alone, one in the storage system, we've used some for the bartering farm. They end up in so many weird places and farms throughout the world. I'll use this smaller glass room to breed them, and then I'll move the adults into the scoop farm next to it. Baby turtles will fall into the water below these holes, fall on top of the hopper, grow up and drop their scoots, and let's not talk about the rest. I'll make a sniffer farm, but first I'm going to need sniffers, so I collected a lot of eggs from the earlier farm that I had made. Let's get those hatched now. While these grow up, and apparently some of you like that I called the snifflets by their real name,
baby sniffers,
I use this time to collect the resources for another major project for today, the moss farm. A lot of our farms require bone meal, including some from today as you've seen. So my plan is to build a small 2x2x1 module version of the Crowmoss farm. This is basically one of the best bone meal farms you can make. I'm going to keep some of the moss because moss is pretty awesome for a lot of things, but we'll convert most of this to bone meal and shulker load the drops. A tutorial to build a small Crowmoss will be linked in the description, so check that out. I'll be doing a much larger version of this later in the series, but for now let's get this one built. All I need to do now is add a few more buckets of lava and we can get this bone meal farm started. Each module of this makes around 2,000 bone meal per hour, so this whole thing would make a full shulker in under 15 minutes. Because I did convert one module to just moss, however, this will make about 3/4 of that. After waiting around for a bit, working on storage and cleaning up the island a bit more, we have our first shulker of bone meal. Let's put some of that in the farms here and head back to the sniffers. Back home and the sniffers have hatched, so it's time to put together a bigger version of our earlier minecart collection and fence that in. Then the ridiculous task of moving sniffers. They move so slowly. So just open up the entire fence and just let them all loose. It's a mess now, but okay. You can put them on leads, it doesn't help. I just kept breaking the leads. Oh my gosh, you are so slow. Let's speed this up. Now after rearranging a few drops, this is where we're at. As I move into the building a lot more part of the game, I think it's important that we're not bottlenecked with small things like dyes. Glass, wool, carpet, terracotta, and more can be dyed, so today we're going to set up a bunch of flower farms to farm specific and sometimes harder to get colors. Our 2-high flower farm gives us red, magenta, pink, and yellow in bulk. A swamp flower farm will give us all the light blue dye. The design I'm using is by Nevermind Flame and was featured in ENIX04's tree farm video. I've used it earlier in the series for the Nether Plants farm back near our tree farm. The farms use pistons to move the ground under the flowers, and a dispenser will bone meal the grass as it moves, and then everything will break instantly. This farm makes over 50,000 drops per hour, and every non-seed drop here will be blue orchids. Using bone meal in certain biomes gives very predictable results. If you bone meal the grass in a swamp, it'll always make blue orchids. There are now meadows with different colors flowers, so we'll head to a blue meadow next for cornflowers. Then flower forest will always bone meal the same flower at the same Y level, so those farms are predictable as well. If you bone meal a plains, you may end up with one of many kinds of flowers, so those farms are less predictable. I'll add a composting system that feeds back into the farm, so any wheat seeds can be immediately composted back into more bone meal. Let's see how this works. That was easy. See how only blue orchids and seeds are made here? This is perfect. That's one flower farm done and 3 more to go. It's time to find a blue meadow. There's a small one here, but after checking it out, it wasn't quite good enough. But past our raid farm and guardian farms, I was able to find a much larger area of blue flower meadow. This one will work. Only cornflowers will grow here. Let's terraform this so it's a little bit flatter and get this farm done. Alright, we're going to turn it on, and as you can see, I can see it's done. Flower farm number 2 is completely finished. It only produces cornflowers. What's up next was a shock to me. I was headed to a flower forest to set up an orange and light gray dye farm. Flower forests have what's called a flower map, and each spot is predictable based on what's around it. Red tulips will always spawn near orange tulips and never near poppies on the same Y level. I know what the flower map patterns look like a little bit, so when I saw one area in this flower forest, I was pretty shocked. Do you see what I see here? The rarest flowers to naturally spawn in a flower forest are Lily of the Valley. While they do spawn frequently here, it's not their actual world generation spawn. What that means is if you bone meal the same spot, unlike every other flower in a flower forest, Lily of the Valley will not reappear. Another flower will take its place instead. This is not true when the lilies are completely surrounded by cornflowers. This is their natural world generation spot, and a farm placed in one of these spots will always produce Lily of the Valley. As I said though, it's by far the most rare to find. I tested it by bone mealing the ground, and yes, a lily reappeared. I wasn't expecting to build this farm here at all, but I'm never going to pass up a chance to get a rare item, so I immediately went to work on that. And in just a few minutes I built this and we can test it out. I knew that it was going to work, but actually seeing it work is great. This is the first time I've ever had a proper working Lily of the Valley farm, and I didn't even know I'd find it when we started today. And the last farm for the flower forest is the orange and light gray one that I came to build. Now I can get every dye in bulk except for green, which can only mean one thing. After collecting some cactus to get started, it's time to build another simple farm. This time it's going to be a small cactus tower. I don't really need to go overboard on this as we have another source for lime dye and cyan dye. This is only for the green. Shall we? With the new cactus farm done, it's now time for a few chores like feeding the turtles and the sniffers. I gotta clean up all the dark oak in this mangrove near our old villager trader. Then I need to trade. I'm not showing any more of these trades. I know what you're thinking. I've already built a super smelter, farms for netherwort, sea pickles, glowberries, glow lichen, coral fans, scoots, sniffers, bone meal, 5 types of flowers, and cactus. Surely I'm done, right? Let's head down to the church for a minute. This is where my 1000 day journey started. I said I wanted to create the most overpowered, crazy world I could, and here we are at the end of day 999. Along the way, I realized I had a chance to create something great, a world I would consider one of the best 1000 day hardcore worlds ever played. I've built over 50 farms, including some of the best farms in Minecraft already. I've found all armor trims, I've set up 17 sets of netherite, built a full auto storage, large super smelter, and a lot more. I've also built my starter home inside the pagoda with the dragon statues out front, a floating island nether portal, Compass Rose City Hub that's going to be a major part of our world in the future. I've found some new friends including the Skelly Horses, all 4 common axolotls, and Loki. I built a villager trading hall and this Buddha island. And as we look at this from above, there's a lot more to come in this spawn. I'm going to be adding to this city with a large arena, military training grounds, guild shops, residential area, some protective towers, and at least a couple of fantasy temples. And that's not even talking about the 2 builds I'm most excited about. So here we are. At the end of day 0, I stood up on top of this church and thought about what was to come for this world. After 1000 days in it, I'm still here. I'm still alive and I'm still standing on top of this church thinking about what's to come next. On screen are a few of the interesting stats for the world so far. I'm very proud of this first 1000 days in the world, and if you haven't caught up with the series, I'll have a couple of videos that'll help you do that soon. But right now, let's get to day 1000. That's it, I survived 1000 days in hardcore Minecraft. I said the words now, it must be true. I'm planning 2 more hardcore videos for this year, so look for those soon. Then we're gonna hit 2024 with a wicked episode. I'll see you then, goodbye.
G'day ladies and gents, Cubic Meter here. The Blast Chamber multi-farm is growing. On top of the concrete converter, cobble generator and tree farm, in my most recent video we also went ahead and added on this copper oxidizer. All of you had some really nice ideas for new additions to the multi-farm. For example, I took a nether tree farm design by Drake Foes and added in the ability to go ahead and change the tree type that you actually want to harvest. So if I want to switch this to crimson, all I need to do is grab the crimson nylium, remove the warp nylium, then hit this note block. It will then change the recovery block to crimson, and also switch over to supplying us with crimson fungus. Then I can turn on the farm, hit this button, and simply start placing down the fungus. So this turned out to be a very simple addition to the multi-farm. However, in this video, we're going to be tackling one of the hardest block conversion mechanics in Minecraft. I am of course talking about generating dirt, converting it to mud, and then converting that to clay, and being able to harvest all 3 of these blocks, all from the same blast chamber. Now this will be a very interesting challenge. So to start with, we need to figure out how we're going to create dirt. Back in 1.16, a funny trick that you could do was craft dirt and gravel into coarse dirt, hoe the coarse dirt to get dirt again, and then repeat the crafting step with gravel that you generate through piglin bartering. However, the crafting step was quite tedious. Ever since 1.17 of course, we have the new mechanic of growing an azalea tree on top of moss to create rooted dirt. But you can also grow tall spruce trees above moss blocks to convert that moss into podzol. So that means we essentially have 2 options for a high efficiency dirt farm. We can either go the rooted dirt from azalea, or with Podzol from tall spruce trees. And both of these blocks have their advantages and disadvantages. Using a dispenser with a water bottle, you can automatically turn rooted dirt into mud. Trying this on Podzol, however, and it doesn't actually work. However, if you were to feed the rooted dirt directly into the blast chamber, you'll find that the rooted dirt will drop as rooted dirt, but the Podzol will be converted to dirt. And the only way to convert rooted dirt to normal dirt is using a hoe. Podzol can also be converted to dirt by using a shovel on it to turn it into a path block, and then destroying the path block to make dirt. However, there is a subtle issue with these processes, as they both require input from the player in order to function. And here lies the problem. If we go the Podzol route, then we're going to need the player to place down saplings to grow the trees. Alright, so why not just go the rooted dirt route? After all, we can actually generate azalea trees automatically without the input from the player. However, the problem is that once we obtain our rooted dirt block, we also need to remove the log block above it in order to grow a new sapling. This automatically cuts the rate of dirt that we can produce in half, because whatever blockstream input we use for the blast chamber will not only need to handle the dirt, but also the excess logs from the azalea trees. On the other hand, using spruce trees, we generate way more Podzol compared to the amount of logs that we need to remove. So we now have a choice that we need to make. Do we go with the rooted dirt approach, or do we go with the Podzol approach? Here's what I'm thinking. We can generate Podzol automatically using the spruce tree farm, and then we can convert it to dirt using the blast chamber. A blast chamber will then give us our shulker boxes of dirt, which we can then convert to mud, which we then have the option to send directly to our blast chamber, or we can instead convert it to clay and send the clay directly to our blast chamber. So unfortunately, rooted dirt misses out for now, simply because of this extra log block, but also because there's no way to convert this rooted dirt into dirt, which is perhaps the most useful block that we want, without using the player. And while yes, I guess you could have an alt account perform the conversions for you, but the moment that you introduce another player as a requirement for using your farm, the whole concept becomes vastly less accessible to the wider community. Not everybody has access to carpet bots, and not everybody has an alt account. And even if you do have an alt account, would you be willing to run 2 instances of Minecraft to run a single farm? And while the automatic aspects of the azalea approach would free up the player to do the conversion on the rooted dirt, this kind of way of generating the azalea saplings is extremely inefficient and slow, on top of the fact that we already need to cut our rates in half by removing these log blocks. So taking into account all of these nuances between the rooted dirt and the Podzol, I find that the Podzol provides the dominating solution in terms of an efficient single player dirt, mud and clay farm. So I guess now we need to get ourselves a tall spruce tree farm that can harvest the Podzol. Now to start with, tree farms have a lot of weird rules. So what I have right here is a simple setup to demonstrate what we can and can't do with tall spruce trees. If I go ahead and just bone meal these saplings, you can see we can grow a lot of trees very quickly. This is of course because I have some command blocks set up to automatically replace the logs with saplings. Now command blocks are going to be your best friend when designing any farm. For example, I also have these 2 command blocks to replace the leaves with air, and also replace the Podzol with more moss. Now we need to choose the geometry and positioning of our moss to convert it to Podzol and then extract it to get our dirt. Placing the moss below where the trees grow makes things a lot more convenient, and I'll show why. So if I just go ahead and bone meal these, we easily grow additional spruce trees. However, if we place our moss blocks on the same level as our saplings, I can bone meal this as much as I want, however the spruce trees will never grow. This is because out of these 4 saplings that we need to place down in order to grow the tall spruce trees, if we look specifically at the northwesternmost sapling, it creates this exclusion zone depicted by the red stained glass, where anything that is not a log or a leaf will prevent the tree from growing. And because it's always the northwestern sapling that does this, that means that any tall spruce tree farm is going to be directional. Because if we want dispensers in order to bone meal the saplings, we can't place them on these sides at all. The only places that we can put these dispensers is either on this side or this side. And if we consider the fact that we need to get the logs out of there in order to grow more trees, we'll also need to have one side reserved for the pistons to come in and push out the logs. And this is something that I kind of hate about tree farms. There are a lot of very specific rules which are highly restrictive in how you can actually process the trees. Alright, so why don't we place the moss at this level, or this level? Well, that reasoning is quite simple. Any blocks which generate above the moss will actually block the podzol from generating. And this includes the leaves that can sometimes generate underneath the saplings if I bone meal these saplings enough. And leaving some extra space for adding the mechanism which pushes out the podzol would be quite handy. Alright, another thing we need to decide is how much podzol do we want to harvest. Because the area where podzol generates is actually very large. However, harvesting this entire area is rather impractical. Because keep in mind, the only way that we can harvest this podzol is by moving in stone and then converting that stone to moss. But if there's too many blocks in the way, we're going to be at push limit and our pistons aren't going to be able to replace the podzol. And then we also need to contend with the fact that it's not 100% reliable that we can convert this entire area to moss. What I think would be the best compromise is a layout which looks like this. So what we have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 length of stone, which is 3 wide on either side of where the tree grows. The advantage we get from this arrangement is that these moss blocks that we use to spread to this stone gets multiple attempts across the entire area of the stone. So we can convert this part to moss, then we can also do this part, and this part, and we can almost always guarantee that we fill the entire area with moss. This means that we can maximize our dirt yields, because stone, which fails to convert to moss, will also naturally fail to convert to podzol when we grow the tree. This layout also gives us a direct path for pistons to push through and extract our podzol. So putting everything together, and what we're building towards is a pretty complicated sequence of events that we need to execute in order to get our dirt. So first of all, we need to grow a tall spruce tree to convert our moss into podzol. Then we need to crush all of these leaves and get them out of the way and extract the saplings from them. The next step is then to replace all this podzol and any remaining moss with stone, and then once all the stone is in place, we generate the moss. And to allow our podzol to generate again, we need to remove all this crap which generates above the moss. I think it's needless to say that we're going to have a pretty complicated farm here. And here is a basic layout to start off with. What we need to take careful note about is that we need things like stone being generated and pushed in from underneath here. We're going to need bone meal supply to all of these dispensers. We're going to need leaf crushing over this entire area to prevent leaves from preventing podzol from generating. We're going to need a system out here to merge all of our podzol as well as these spruce logs that we need to remove in order to place down saplings. And all of this needs to come out of a single block stream that we can feed into our TNT efficient blast chamber. Here's where the choice of limiting these to 3 blocks wide really comes in handy, because in order to merge all this podzol together, all we need is simply 3 pistons arranged like this. When we push in the podzol, we can start a sequence that looks like this. So what we have is these 3 observers watching when these blocks start moving. Initially, we fire this piston first, which immediately pushes the first podzol in the middle down. And what is important for making sure that we can merge all this podzol together later on is that we want to use a timing scheme that makes sense and lines up really well with our final block stream. For example, our blast chamber takes a 4 game tick block stream as an input, which means there is a 4 game tick interval between each block moving in the block stream. If we also consider that we're going to have another one of these streams on the other side, that means we want this block stream to be half the speed at 8 game ticks. So, counting our observers, which each give a 2 game tick delay, from the moment that this piston pushes the first block down, we have this observer activates this rail at the same time that that piston starts moving the first podzol, which means we want to start counting from this observer. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After 6 game ticks, this piston pushes a podzol over into the middle. Then notice how we also have these 2 observers, which then go and power the center piston. So backtracking from this piston at 6 game ticks, we take away the 2 of this observer, back to this rail. So now we're at 4 game ticks. We go 5, 6, 7, 8. So this block will start moving 8 game ticks after the first block. And notice how these 2 pistons are connected together by this same rail line. This means that both of these pistons will try to fire at the same time. However, in this tug of war, it's the piston that pushes first which prevails. Something to keep in mind about rails is that they actually trigger devices like observers in the reverse order to how you power them. So even though the power comes in this side of the rail, it is actually this piston, which is powered from the end of the rail, which triggers first. So watching the full sequence, you can see the left piston goes first, then the right piston goes. And this is because we give another 8 game ticks delay, which is what this repeater is set to, before we trigger the rail line again, and what we obtain is a full, quick and simple... Oh. Okay, that makes sense. We ran this so many times that this piston has run into push limit. As I was saying, we get a quick and simple block merging sequence. And the beauty of having all 3 observers here is that, say for example, there was a moss block which generated in the middle somewhere here. However, those other 2 observers will still see the other 2 blocks moving and activate the sequence. So that means we will obtain block stream merging no matter what chaos ensues within the growth chamber. Alright, now we have both sides set up. I've got a command block to test out the block merging. And down here, I have a simple smart piston which redirects the blocks into the 4 game tick block stream. Let's go ahead and take this for a spin. Ah, that doesn't look good. So here we have some podzol blocks lingering in the block stream, and there's a very good reason for this. Both of these block streams are 8 game ticks, however, they're trying to merge together into a 4 game tick block stream. And of course, in this situation, we have the tug of war going on, and our blocks are colliding trying to merge together. There is a simple solution for this, however. We expect a block in this block stream to move every 8 game ticks, and a block in this block stream to move every 8 game ticks, and a block in this block stream to move every 4 game ticks. That means that all we need to do is offset these 2 by 4 game ticks. And that can be done all the way back here. If I just break out these 2 rails and put 1, 2, 3, 4 game ticks of delay between these 2 sides, we obtain great success. If we take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks multiplied by our 4 game tick block stream, we can power these pistons every 24 game ticks. And what we obtain is a continuous 4 game tick output stream. This would give us our maximum possible speed of 18,000 dirt per hour. However, unfortunately, this maximum possible speed is going to be slowed down by the fact that at some point we're going to have to wait for trees to grow, but also for water to clear out all the junk that generates on top of our moss. So what rates should we be aiming for? Well, honestly, I will be satisfied if we can at least obtain 9,000 dirt per hour, which is equivalent to the speed at which hoppers transfer items from one inventory to another. Now you might argue that it might be possible to obtain the full 18,000 dirt per hour by using buffers to cache excess podzol during times when the farm is running quickly, and then deplete the buffers when the farm is taking longer to do stuff. However, you're always going to have to deal with that edge case where trees grow instantly and everything happens way faster than usual, and then eventually at some point the buffer could just randomly overflow. So the compromise here is that by limiting the speed that we process blocks to the speed in which we can send them into a 4GameTick block stream, we can essentially withstand even the most unlikely circumstances. But the cost is that we don't always get the maximum speed possible. And I don't really mind. We're going to get incredible bone meal efficiency to actually getting podzol due to how reliably we can generate moss and podzol using this layout. This farm is going to optimize for efficiency over sheer speed, which makes sense after all. We're using a TNT efficient blast chamber, which is the whole reason why we're restricted to a blockstream output. Alright, here is a really simple stone generator that I've set up to run at 24 game ticks. So this should push in some stone into these command blocks that will delete the stone every 24 ticks, which is exactly in sync with this whole system up here. Alright, let's give it a spin. Oh wait, that's not good. What's going on here? So needless to say, our stone generator generating cobblestone is not very good, because cobblestone cannot be converted to moss. Here's a really obscure fact about fluids. In the overworld, lava will schedule itself to flow every 30 game ticks. However, water will schedule itself to flow every 5 ticks. You would expect water being much faster would actually reach the center before the lava has the chance to start flowing. With these blocks in the center moving every 24 ticks split between the two stone generators, each stone generator moves every 48 game ticks. The solution to this is that we make a stone generator which pulls the stone away, allowing the water to flow into the space immediately. So running at an interval of 24, we don't ever generate any cobblestone. With the stone generator sorted, we now need to move on to the leaf crushers. Now we know from testing that leaves can generate essentially anywhere, and any block between the moss and the blocks where the saplings sit on will prevent the podzol from forming. And this is unfortunate because it's really easy to make a simple double extender to crush the leaves, but unfortunately these leaf crushers are going to block podzol from generating. To prevent that, we're going to need that extra block of travel in our leaf crushers. Fortunately, there does turn out to be a solution in slimestone. Now, I do not engage very often with slimestone, mainly because I'm quite terrible at it, but this seems like a pretty good attempt to me. If I trigger this down here, we can launch the flying machine, and it can travel any distance that we want until it collides with blocks that it can't move. Then all we need to do is trigger this observer and it'll start flying back. Provided that I actually put the blocks in properly. Don't worry, I'm a professional slimestoner clearly. And the best part is that the whole thing is vertically tileable, allowing us to extend it all the way to the max height that a spruce tree can grow. So if I go ahead and just test it quickly, it goes all the way. Oh. Yeah, I'm starting to think that maybe I'm not a professional slimestoner. Oh dear god. Well hey, at least I discovered a self-assembling staircase. Although not a very good one. Alright, now that we actually have blocks to stop the flying machines, we can launch them, have them stop, and then these observers in this circuit launches them again in the opposite direction, so they park right back where they started. The use of flying machines to crush leaves in tree farms is not very optimal because they're very slow and take a long time to process a tree. However, in this particular case, it doesn't really matter how fast we process the trees, because what we really want is the podzol, which is going to take time to process because we're limited by the single block stream. Now, copying the leaf crushers to the other side, and we run into a little bit of a problem. We have these dispensers that we need to supply bone meal to, and the only way that I can really see us doing that is by punching a hole through here and running some dropper lines. If we try to clock these repeater lines, like so, most of the droppers get powered. However, at the very end, these repeaters stay constantly powered, meaning our actual dispensers are not dispensing. Interestingly, this problem can be fixed simply by using comparators all the way until the end and then have a repeater. This is because repeaters have a higher tile tick priority than comparators, meaning repeaters will want to power before comparators, allowing you to clock this line at the max speed without the repeaters at the end staying constantly powered. To trigger both sides of the leaf crushers simultaneously, we can use this simple rail-based instant wire that I was shown by Eagle, who I play with on the Wavetick server. All this is a block update detector, where if you send it a block update, it can synchronize events over very long distances. There is one problem that our leaf crushers won't be able to contend with, and that is leaves generating at this bottommost level where the podzol generates. The problem is that we can't run flying machines down here because the flying machines would get stuck to the podzol. To deal with this, we can have sticky pistons which push the stone upwards and then retract it again prior to the moss being generated. And with perfect timings, you can get all of this done in one swift operation. So here we would be replacing the podzol with stone, while also flushing all the items to the center. As you just saw, we extended the stone up, then retracted it, generated the moss, and then had water flowing for just long enough to remove all the crap above the moss. Here's a neat trick for fine-tuning any timings. Now, in my hotbars, I have something that I like to refer to as my timing blocks. These are command blocks that run a special command with Minecraft's scoreboard system to give me exact timings. In order to create the counter, I need to run this command, and then using a repeating command block to increment the counter, I can very precisely time the amount of game ticks between redstone activations of these command blocks. This means if I'm analyzing a specific circuit like this, for example, I can place one of these command blocks at each one of the redstone inputs and get the exact difference in game ticks between them. If we take a look at the dirt farm, this circuit right here is a very specific delay for when we remove the water after the moss has been generated. Let's say that I had no idea what this delay should be. What I can do is apply another trick where, using carpet mod, you can use command tick freeze in a command block activated by the circuit that you want to analyze. And now, if I trigger the whole system and run through the whole operation, there we go, we're now frozen. I can now begin tick stepping. And now I know that water will try to flow every 5 game ticks. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the water should start flowing now. However, our timing is off and the water has been removed before it could actually start flowing in the first place. So already I know that this delay is way too short. Let's try increasing it with a few repeaters. And there. Now the water has started flowing. If I step exactly 5 ticks... the water got removed before it could move another block. Let's try increasing this delay a bit. We're still removing the water slightly too early. Bump up the delay one more, and hopefully this should be enough. Here we are at the moment where the water starts flowing again. Let's go ahead and step by 5. And now, our water has flown over to the second block. We step again. At this moment, we remove the water block. However, the water is now continuing to flow. And hopefully, yes, so this should be actually the perfect timing. Because as you can see, the water has just managed to remove all of the stuff above the moss blocks. But also, the water subsides as quickly as it possibly can, meaning we can now grow a tree at this moment. So essentially, by fine-tuning these timings, we can ensure that the water is blocking all this moss for the shortest time possible, so we can start growing trees again as quickly as possible, giving us as least downtime as possible to maximize our rates. A little while later, with all the timings fine-tuned, I went ahead and built up the rest of the circuitry. A funny quirk of this farm is that in order to get the player into a position where they can place down the saplings, I'm using a boat which is sort of levitating on an edge like so. So if I go ahead and align this boat, then automatically moving the player back and forth is as simple as extending this piston. Isn't that neat? In order to actually detect the tree growth, I'm using this simple push limit detector developed by Kaylee. The moment that it detects that a tree has grown in the chamber up here, meaning that all this moss should have been converted to podzol, it will trigger the instant wire that then activates all the systems which replaces the podzol with stone and then prepares it for the next cycle. Then all that was left to do was simply hook it up to the Omni Farm. Now one slight issue is that if we just use the mixed box loader, what we get is not just dirt but also the logs and the cobblestone all mixed together in the same box. In order to remedy this issue, I've gone ahead and added this additional box loader which is dedicated to dirt blocks. So up here it has an item filter for dirt, and so the shulker boxes that we get out of this should only contain dirt. To get into the dirt farm section, we want to go all the way back to the elevator, like so. Then we're presented immediately with the bone meal input. And if we go around here, we can find the door to get inside of the growth chamber. To start the farm, I can take these spruce saplings out of this barrel and then jump into this boat. If I put my cursor just so that it's on these log blocks, I can then start placing down the saplings. And it's that simple to start the dirt farm. While the dirt farm's running, I've added this system up here to redirect all the items into the new box loader array where we can filter off the dirt, and then the other junk that we don't want, such as the cobblestone and the logs, they can just despawn in this loop. And then to turn the farm off, simply put the stack of saplings back in the barrel. Now one thing to be cautious of once you stop running the farm is that if you accidentally bump this boat, you're going to have to grab yourself some blocks and just realign the boat by moving the boat back against them, like so. After tick warping the farm for an hour, these are the final rates that we get. And we only use 4 shulker boxes of bone meal to get roughly 8 shulker boxes of dirt. This insane bone meal efficiency can be attributed to the fact that we literally recycle every single organic that comes out of this farm back into composters to create more bone meal, which we recycle back into the input for the farm. So now that we have neatly filled shulker boxes of dirt, we can recycle these back into a system that converts them to mud and possibly into clay. However, this video is already 30 minutes long, and so that's going to have to wait for the next video. This was probably one of the most challenging technical builds I've done in a while, So I hope you guys enjoyed going through a detailed look of my design process. And of course, if you want to be notified about when future videos come out, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you next time. G'day ladies and gents, Cubic Meter here. Welcome to the wonderful world of wireless redstone. I am of course talking about the process in which two redstone machines can communicate with each other over some arbitrarily long distance without any physical connection between the machines. For example, if I hit this button right here, we can see this lamp will light up even though there was no physical connection going from this button to that lamp. This form of wireless redstone is based upon a very specific property of item entities, which was discovered by none other than TunoToName. Be sure to check out his video on the topic to learn exactly how he discovered this extremely ambiguous mechanic. In fact, when he made his original discovery, I was extremely privileged to be able to work with him on some of the very first wireless redstone prototypes. He taught me how to assign communication channels using repeaters and comparators, and I taught him how to make compact and modular wiring. However, these early prototypes tended to come with a lot of issues such as interference and unintended behaviors. And so I finally decided to sit down and develop a rigorous foundation for the field of wireless redstone. In this video, we will go over the mechanic and different terminologies to both understand and apply wireless redstone in useful contraptions. The field of wireless redstone is a very complicated topic, so establishing names for things is a great start, allowing people to communicate and collaborate as they build upon the foundation set in this video. In order to begin understanding wireless redstone, we first need to understand subtick mechanics. In Minecraft, events such as this piston extending are processed in steps. And each one of these steps is known as a game tick. It's exactly equal to 1/20th of a second. This means that one game tick is equal to 50 milliseconds, making the free game tick extension of this piston exactly equal to 150 milliseconds. Events that happen in different game ticks are very easy to visualize because you can physically see the difference in time between things like these pistons extending. However, what then happens if two mutually exclusive events occur in the exact same game tick? If we look at these observers right here, each observer has 2 game ticks of delay, meaning we have 1, 2, 3, 4 game ticks before this piston starts extending. But notice that we have the same delay for both of these pistons, meaning both of these pistons will start extending in the same game tick. This can easily be visualized by pulling the pistons upwards and powering them at exactly the same time. But then what happens if both of these pistons try to extend in the same game tick? Well, if one piston extends, then the other piston cannot extend. How on earth does the game decide which piston should extend? Well, if we power this redstone wire with some observers, we can clearly see that the first piston to extend is also the one that's closest to our power source. However, I should note that with redstone wire, this is not always the case. Redstone wire can be quite random in the way in which it orders block updates such as pistons extending. But with this simple case of a straight wire, you can clearly see that the closest piston is the one that gets chosen to extend. On this channel, I've already introduced how rails will in fact reverse this order. So if I power this side, the farthest piston will extend first. So what we can infer from these two tests is that the game has a specific order in which it processes block events from different redstone components. Let's then have a look at a circuit like this, where we have repeaters and comparators after our power sources. Both of these tile sets have exactly the same amount of delay, so we have 2 game ticks from the comparator and 2 game ticks from the repeater, meaning we get 4 game ticks for this tile set and 4 game ticks for this tile set. The order of these observers will be dependent on this rail. However, if we go ahead and power both of the observers in the same game tick, we will see that it is the piston that is entirely powered by repeaters that always powers first. This is because this tile set completely resets the order from these observers. This is because in order to keep track of what things need to happen with redstone, the game will make a list of everything that needs to happen and the amount of time before that event happens. This repeater and this comparator are scheduled to power 2 game ticks later by these observers. In any situation, the game will schedule updates for a repeater before they schedule the updates for a comparator. This means our tile set with repeaters always has priority over our tile set with a comparator. This is known as tile tick priority, and it even applies to repeaters with different delays. If we have a look at these tile sets, we can clearly see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 game ticks before this piston, and 1, 2, 3, 4 game ticks before this piston. Once again, no matter which way that we power this, we always see that piston powering first. This is because when the game is creating the list of components that need to power, this repeater is scheduled to power 4 game ticks after this observer. However, this repeater is only scheduled to power 2 game ticks after the observer, meaning after 2 game ticks have gone by, we then add another repeater to the list, which goes in behind this repeater that has already been scheduled. The result is that the longer delay repeater always has a higher priority. This allows the creation of something known as a tile set. Here are the 2 combinations of tile set that we can get for 2 repeaters of 2 game ticks and 4 game ticks delay. No matter how I power this rail here, we will always see these 2 lamps turning on in the same game tick. However, the order in the same game tick is dependent on the tile set, and this tile set will always be scheduled to power before this tile set. Adding in more components gives us more combinations of tile sets, and the amount of different tile sets that you can have scheduled in the same game tick goes by the factorial of the number of different components you can compose that tile set from. The factorial is simply a mathematical expression in which the factorial of any number is the multiplication of every number that precedes it, including that number. So with 3 different redstone components, we are able to obtain 3 factorial combinations, which is equal to exactly 6 different combinations. Making use of all 4 variants of a repeater, we can get 4 factorial combinations, or 24 different tick phases within the same game tick. We can take this even further, adding in a comparator as a redstone component, so that we now have 120 different combinations. So how do all these tile sets correlate to wireless redstone? By using these tile sets, we can obtain an extremely precise ordering for any type of event that we want to happen inside the game. What I've got here is a bunch of redstone components to demonstrate how we create item entities in a specific order. If I trigger this entire system, what it will do, it will tick freeze at the moment that it's about to remove these blocks below the items. Now this is where the item entity comes into our wireless redstone. Every single one of these item entities has been created in a very precise order defined by these tile sets. But what's important to remember is that all of these items were created in the exact same game tick. If I go ahead and tick step, what you will see is some items will begin falling immediately. Here you can see a very clean modulo force separation of the items falling. Looking from a distance as I unfreeze, this modulo force separation becomes extremely evident. This separation that we can see between the items is based upon an important optimization that Mojang has added to item entities sitting on the floor. Instead of checking whether there is a block underneath them and whether they can start falling every single game tick, an item will only check for this every 4th game tick. In order to create the illusion of continuous falling between item entities, what they will do is separate the phase in which they check for the block underneath them, meaning that every fourth item will start falling in the same game tick, which you can clearly see when I start untick freezing. So, by using unique tile sets, we can very precisely control the order in which we create item entities in the world, and this process is done globally for an entire dimension. This means if you have one configuration of tiles in one location and another configuration of tiles in another location, all defining the phase in which items are dispensed into the world, these machines can communicate to each other by the order in which items are falling. So what we are literally doing is shooting the items out of droppers on top of these trapdoors, and then opening both of the trapdoors at the same moment, and then seeing which phase the item entities start falling, at which point they will immediately be picked up by the hopper, and then be detected by the comparator, and that way we can very precisely compare the phase in which the items begin to fall. So, how do we actually translate the order of item entities being shot out of droppers into a message which can be sent to another machine somewhere on the server? Well, what you need to do is develop a protocol. These resource blocks represent the phase which repeats every fourth game tick. Each one of these wool blocks represents an item being shot out of a dropper. For each wool that sticks up a block, we have an item that is being measured. So what we have is the tile set for orange, like so. This one will have the highest priority. And then we have it powering this rail. Right here we have the dropper, which is dispensing the item that we measure. In different positions of the rail, we can also have filler items that can change the phase of other items that get dispensed down the line. So we have the item being measured, and then two filler items giving us the phase diagram for our orange. The magenta is given a tile set with a priority after our orange. Our magenta will have two filler items dispensed before the item that we measure, and then another two filler items dispensed afterwards, giving us the phase diagram for our magenta. Somewhere else in the world, we also have the module which is represented by this blue and yellow wool. This particular machine features a clock which will self-synchronize over any distance. Because in order to actually communicate, first we need to actually make sure that our tiles are being powered in the same game tick. If our modules are not synchronized, as in they are not being powered in the same game tick, their phases will look like these two sets. And what you can clearly see is that the item that we measure for orange is going to start falling in a different game tick to the item that we measure for magenta. The same is also true for blue and yellow. What this actually means is that we have given orange the highest priority tile set, we then give blue the next highest priority tile set, then we give it to magenta, and then we give it to yellow. If these modules happen to power in exactly the same game tick, our phase will look like this, where we have the orange always power first on top of the netherite block. It will push over the blue to have its item measured on top of the netherite block. The magenta will be pushed over to the netherite block, and also the yellow. This means that if they happen to align, all of the items will start falling in exactly the same game tick. That allows these machines to actually detect if they randomly coincide. So if I was to disrupt their clock like so, there we go. The modules have now desynchronized, and this one will run on a 32 game tick clock, while this module will run on a 31 game tick clock. Sooner or later, these modules will happen to randomly coincide, and at that point they will know that they have synchronized, and all of a sudden, they both switch over to the same 32 game tick clock, and now they are perfectly synchronized. And with both modules perfectly synchronized, I am now able to send a message by activating this system right here. There we go. The message is sent almost instantly. And here's the really cool thing. You can experiment with different protocols for sending messages. For example, this other part of the module is actually what sends the message. This system is simply to synchronize both sides of the telemetry. I need to use this protocol for the self-synchronizing modules because I want to make sure that their clocks are all synchronized, meaning the items that we need to detect all need to fall in the same phase. When I'm sending the message, however, I don't need them to be falling in the same game tick, meaning that I can use a different protocol that uses less items. This protocol is very similar, but only uses 2 items in each of the modules. And the coolest thing about this protocol is that not only does it send the message, it also sends a confirmation signal back to the transmitter to confirm that the message was sent. Over here, I have a different system which uses a different protocol to only transmit signals. Now, in order to get around this whole complicated synchronizing fiasco, if we are transmitting signals in the overworld, we can develop a very simple clock which can synchronize over any distance in the overworld. Daylight sensors will update in the same game tick everywhere, meaning if I go ahead and activate all of these receivers, all of these daylight sensors will be in sync with each other. And so I can go over to the transmitter, select any one of the colors, and transmit to that color. Because I'm not receiving a confirmation signal, I can use a much simpler protocol here. In the modules, I simply dispense 2 items and they start falling in different game ticks. These 2 items in the receivers can be represented on our phase diagram by these 2 blocks right here. When I trigger the transmitter, it will then shove 3 filler items in between them, forcing the items in the receivers to align in the same phase. This is how we are able to transmit the signal to a particular module. So what we do is we grab our ordered tile set. Our receivers will have the tile sets on the outside, then our transmitter will have the tile set on the inside. So that means that our receivers will have the items on the outside, transmitter will then shove the filler items on the inside. These phase diagrams can be very useful for defining properties about different protocols. For example, what if I was to add another white receiver somewhere else in the world? Well, this means that the protocol would have an item like this, then another item like this, and then 2 more items representing our 2 modules. If I was to then activate the transmitter in between these, we would see 1, 2 like this, the 3 filler items from our transmitter, then the 2 reference items from our receiver. You can clearly see now that if I was to add another white receiver somewhere in the world, our protocol breaks down because now this first item from the first receiver is no longer aligning with the second item from the first receiver, and the same for the second receiver. So I've just got a schematic ready for a second receiver. We can check to see that with only 1 receiver, it works perfectly fine. If I, however, go ahead and add the second receiver like so, now if I try and send a signal on the white frequency, it won't work at all. From this example, you can clearly see how the protocol defines what you can actually do with a particular wireless redstone machine. This makes designing the protocol one of the most important steps before you start. With some really clever wireless redstone, we can make some really powerful tech, such as this binary encoded enderpearl stasis chamber. I had some help from a player named Juabro, who designed this amazing protocol. With some redstone trickery in the receivers, Duabro managed to turn the modulo 4 that we get by default into a modulo 2, making this perfect for sending binary signals. In the receiver, we have 6 different channels representing our bits, as well as a single reference channel. At all times, every one of our bits is constantly being compared to our reference channel, which you can clearly see lies on the diamond block, while everything else sits on the netherite block by default. However, if we want to target a particular channel such as the red, what we can do is from our transmitter, dispense an item after the red has fired, and this will shift all the other colors across, as well as our reference item at the end, which now lands in the same phase as our red channel. If we want to select a different channel, such as the blue, what we need to do is dispense the channel before it, such as the red, as well as the channel for blue, meaning everything gets shifted across such that the reference item now lands in the same phase as our blue channel. The best part about this protocol is that you can add as many receivers as you want on the same network, and they can all receive the same signals from any transmitter. And so this is what I have right here. I have 3 different receivers as well as 3 different transmitters, all with their own Enderpearl stasis chambers. If we have a look at our tile sets, we can see we have the tile tick priority being set by these repeaters, and then the network is then set by all of these repeaters. So for all receivers that you want to be on the same network, you want these repeaters to be exactly the same. And if you want a receiver to be on a different network, all you need to do is change these repeaters slightly, and then you have a new network. Inside the binary decoders, I have assigned this receiver to a binary value of 1 right here. Then over here we have 2 bits dedicated to the particular slice of Enderpearl stasis chamber. So with this particular network, we are capable of storing 15 different locations, and on each location we can have 1 to 4 Enderpearl stasis chambers. I just go ahead and activate the clocks for all of these receivers. I can go down to the interface. I can select location 1. I can select stasis chamber 2. If I hit this note block, it should now take me straight there. There we go. We are in the second stasis chamber of our first location. Let me just put the Enderpearl back in. I can now go to this interface, select another destination, hit this note block, and we should be teleported straight over there. Perfect. So clearly, you can see how powerful Wireless Redstone can become with some clever mechanics. If you want to have a play around with Wireless Redstone yourself, I will be leaving a world download of this world down the description. However, a note of warning, in single player, the Wireless Redstone can be unreliable. This is because for some reason in single player, the client being present and actually loading an area can cause items to randomly be reassigned in the entity list. This means if you're trying to use Wireless Redstone in single player and you see some unexpected behavior, it is likely because your client is causing items to get rehashed. On a multiplayer server, however, the wireless telemetry should be perfectly reliable. For now, that will be all from the wonderful world of Wireless Redstone. There should be plenty of new protocols and uses to discover for this emerging field of Redstone. And if you like technical content like this, feel free to subscribe. It will notify you about any future videos I post and show YouTube that people do in fact enjoy the technical side of Minecraft. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time. G'day ladies and gents, Cubic MIDI here with Wavetech's brand new ultimate main storage. Check it out, we have storage for items. Oh, and that? Yeah, that's just the decoration for the storage. Now this is Wavetech's main storage. This project has been absolutely massive, as it's almost been an entire year since I first announced the initiation of this project in my Shulker Farm video. I want to give a special thanks to all of the people from Wavetech who helped out along the way, such as Trolley and Kuku who helped with the prototyping of technical components, Max as well as Inventor for designing the concept for this beautiful interior, Auntie and Spay who designed this absolutely gargantuan exterior decoration, as well as many more players from Wavetech who helped out building the thing in survival. So what is all the commotion about main storages? After all you need to store your items is a couple of chests, right? Well, unfortunately that doesn't quite cut it on a technical server such as Wavetech. Because on Wavetech we have insane farms such as this gold farm which is so fast that it absolutely murders my frame rates. And the basic premise of a server like this is that we want to build crazy machines as well as beautiful decorations to complement those machines. And all of those items needed to build the machines and create the decorations need to be stored somewhere. And a main storage system such as this one can be a major asset to a technical server. Because I don't know if you noticed, but the player's inventory is somewhat to be desired. So we need large redstone machines to pick up the slack and do things that the player's inventory could only dream of. For example, do you need 50,000 stone for a project? Well, look no further than Wavetech's bulk terminal, where you can simply request the item and receive it in bulk. There we go. That's 46,000 stone blocks delivered in less than 10 seconds. Or maybe you just need a stack of pistons, some scaffolding for a project, a single pickle. Or maybe you just want to touch some grass. A main storage system makes everything you could possibly want accessible on demand. But sorting items isn't the only thing this storage is good for. And we'll go over all of these extra features in detail later on in the video. But first, let's have a quick tour of the storage and experience what it's like to use in survival. Our tour begins at the Nether Hub. All we need to do is take the green piston bolt heading south to main storage. There we go, it's already set to main storage. Get in the minecart and will automatically be sent all the way there using this advanced piston bolt network designed by the one and only Rufro. Alright, who's the cunny fun who decided to put this here? But back to the piston bolts, we have full integration with the chest cart system for moving items in and out of main storage by the box. To learn more about this piston bolt network, you can watch my previous video titled The Insane Engineering of Wavetech's Piston Bolt Network. But here on the nether side, we have the portal which takes players to the storage, as well as the nether side of the storage's chunk loading system. This chunk loading system is what enables the storage to function completely independently of the player's presence. And you might notice that we've gone ahead and sliced all of the portals for this chunk loading system because we don't want any funny business with pigmen spawning in our chunk loading portals. Going through the portal, and we are first presented with the utilities area. These are some specialized shulker box displays for tools and armor, which do not eject the box until the player closes it. So if I was to remove all these rockets, you can see it doesn't eject the box immediately. And this is pretty handy for when you want to restock things like rockets or food. We also see the first of many item sorting inputs that you can access in order to input items into the sorting system. So in this shulker box you can simply dump your inventory, or you can put entire shulker boxes in the chest. Just over here we've got an unstackable sorter for sorting various unstackable items that have very unique ways to actually sort them from other items. And over here we have a pretty powerful mass crafting system which uses our good friend the dolphin. This is one of the 5 storage tech innovations that I introduced in a previous video. But let me give you a demonstration right here for context. Let's say we want to craft a shulker box of observers because we always seem to be running low on them. Well, all I need to do is grab our materials. So we got 6 boxes of cobblestone, 1 shulker box of nether quartz, and 2 shulker boxes of redstone dust. And all we need to do is input our items. Make sure we have the recipe selected in Item Scroll's Mass Crafting GUI. Then I can just go ahead, hit the button, stand right here on this carpet, activate Mass Crafting, and open up this crafting table. You just heard the dolphin staggering the entity IDs. And now I get all the items with their staggered pickup priority perfectly into my inventory and craft exactly 1 shulker box worth of observers. I can simply input them into this shulker box display and immediately get my shulker box. If you want to learn about how to set up the mass crafting yourself, I gave a little demonstration in the previous video of 5 simple storage tech innovations. That there is another shulker box of observers. So what other utilities does our main storage have? Well, you've already seen our bulk interface, which I demonstrated earlier. If you go over here around this corner, you can find our advanced shulker box color sorting system. Oh look, it's our second best gold farm. Now on WaveTech, we allow specifically empty shulker boxes to either stack by the player manipulating them, or stack when they interact with each other as entities on the floor. Now what this allows us to do is not only organize all of our empty shulker boxes by their color, but also store them in a much higher density. And this has some really powerful implications that we'll investigate later on. And it looks like somebody might have missed part of the decoration in this corner. As I said, this was a massive project and we're gonna miss some little details when we build the thing in survival. Oh god, that doesn't sound good. And once again, it's an absolute pain having any water anywhere near any redstone. Alright, now I understand why nobody wanted to fix it until now. Anyway, leaving that disaster we just created, if we go over here, we just got a simple little furnace array that you can input items here. Not sure why these boxes are here. Yeah, you can just input items here and have them smelted. Over there is a very special section of the storage, and this is the general purpose area. So we have the project rooms where we can have materials prepared for various projects that we want to do in the future, as well as some nice spaces for the various map arts that we have on the server. And just back here, there we go, this is our map art gallery, essentially. Over here we have the personal item caches for all the players on WaveTech. And for some reason, a lectern containing the entire manuscript of B-Movie. A random chest for copper variants, because honestly, who can be bothered trying to sort any of this garbage? And no main storage is complete without an extravagant bed chamber. But do you know what every main storage really needs? That's right, an RGB gaming beacon. Hey buddy, what are you doing here? You trying to escape from my storage system? You might recognize this bad boy from my Let's Build an Encoded RGB Beacon video. But apparently it also doubles as a mysteriously floating glow squid farm. However, with this design, no holes allowed. Anyway, one major problem with using an encoded RGB beacon like this is that all the logic can get completely screwed up with constant unloading and reloading, which is why I've implemented this mechanism which will automatically fully reset the entire logic of the beacon every time the chunks are initially loaded. We can also manually reset the beacon by hitting this note block. If we go ahead and take a look at the beacon beam, I now hit the note block. There we go, if we reset all the logic, the beacon should go back to its default color. There we go, it's going back to white. And now it will start the sequence again at the color black. Nope, that's orange. Ah, there we go. Yeah, sometimes the controller can be a little bit finicky, but the beauty is that it doesn't matter how screwed up the wiring gets in this machine, because it can all be fully reset back to the start of the sequence. So all of these color states can be completely screwed up by initially loading the machine while it's running, but then the full reset will completely fix the entire thing automatically. If only every redstone machine could be made resistant to unloading. So, RGB gaming beacons are obviously cool and all, but how does the storage fare from a practical standpoint? Well, one thing that I've been subtly hinting at is how roomy the interior is, to allow us to fly around the storage to quickly get around. A lot of people criticize how wide these halls are, because for some reason people seem to be obsessed with this idea of an extremely compact hall where every item is accessible from a centralized point. However, with wide halls and more space, you'll find that you can close that distance much more efficiently by simply flying around with an elytra. This effectively counteracts the distance between the items presented by the wide halls. Another very subtle feature is breaking up the symmetry by making every hall a unique color. This means that the player doesn't lose track of their orientation in the storage and can always associate a specific color with a specific set of items. For example, if I'm looking for any items associated with wood or plants, I know to go to the blue hall where we have all the wood types, as well as lots of different foliage, plants, flowers, and other resources produced by growing crops. If I want something related to decorative building, what I have to do is fly directly into the yellow hall, where we store all the various block types that can be used for building. The red hall is pretty straightforward, it's just all the different colors of things. And the green hall is redstone related stuff as well as other miscellaneous items. However, the only slight oversight with the item layout is that because there's not quite enough room in the color hall, all the different dyes have been put all the way over here in the yellow hall. But obviously this entire item layout can be changed to whatever preferences you want. Taking a closer look at the halls, we have a one wide tileable layout where we have 4 items per slice. In the roof of each hall, we have these chests which store the various item types that we don't quite have enough of to store in shulker boxes. So what you'll find here is random junk that you won't expect to have very much of. That is, unless you really want to accelerate the decline of coral reefs. On the sides we have the semi-bulk displays. So what we have here is chest storage for shulker boxes of items. So this can store up to 300,000 of each one of these item types. At the bottom we have a box display for full shulker boxes. Then at the top we have an additional box display which gives us access to the shulker box as it's being loaded. This accessible box loader is actually extremely handy because if you can't quite find an item down here in the full box display, it's almost guaranteed that you might actually find it up here because these items come directly from the item sorting. In this way, this storage can effectively help you find really rare and obscure items. For example, do you have an entity alignment that needs a small amethyst bud? Well, it just so happens that the item sorter found 3 of them. Or maybe you need a spare turtle egg to make a second best gold farm. These halls can store any item you need in the amount that you need. Another really cool feature of these halls is, say for example I want to build something very intricate such as this windmill. I can bring up a materials list and I can simply go to the respective halls, grab the items. So I need 93 deep plate, so about 2 stacks. I can then start throwing them into one of these black boxes like so. I can then gather any other resource like the stone bricks. And so now I've essentially started a material box for this windmill. If I want the box, all I have to do is press this button. There we go, and it gives me a free shulker box. And now I can go to another area of the storage, like say over here to where the walls are, throw it into this square right here, and then it will replace the empty box with the one that I'm currently working with. And now I can grab the stone brick walls like so, duck them into the box, and then to replace the empty box again, there we go. And now grab the box that I'm working on and put the empty box back into the display. And if you've been organizing projects with main storages in the past, you'll understand how significant this is. Because no longer do you need to place down a box, put items in it, then break it again and potentially break other parts of the storage. And these empty shulker boxes in these floor displays are effectively like electricity in a house, where you can tap into it anywhere in the storage. And it will surprise you at how complicated it was to actually set this distribution system up. Alright, so now that we've looked at everything that the player will interact with in survival, let's head over to a creative world to have a look at the intricate mechanics inside of the machine. Here we are in a single player world in creative mode, so we can fly around and look at everything. This is the entire fully assembled storage as it currently is on Wavetech's SMP. However, just flying around on here is pretty cramped, and all of the intricate systems are all bound together in a complicated mess that makes it very hard to look at. So what I've gone and done is prepared a special area with a full storage breakdown. So I can just go ahead and click this button. It'll teleport me to this area where I've pulled apart all the various systems embedded into the main storage. So right here is all of the storage halls fully assembled. Underneath we have the encoded RGB beacon. Off over this end is the bulk system, and floating above the storage is two very critical systems for Wavetech's main storage. This right here is the entirety of the shulker distribution system. So that includes all of these black shulker box floor displays, the yellow shulker boxes for the item sorting inputs, the purple shulker boxes that you can see in the unstackable sorter, and the grey shulker boxes which we use in all of the accessible box loader displays. Then at the top, this is the item sorting system. We have the overstacked item filters. These ones are configured for 2x hopper speed for all of our semi-bulk items. In the middle, we have single hopper speed overstacked item filters for the loose chest items. This right here is the item sorting input from the utilities room, along with the dropper line that sends all of the shulker boxes that we input into the item sorting all the way to the parallel entity item sorter over here. Now, the entire purpose of this machine is to make use of the fact that we have multiple item filters for multiple different item types that could theoretically all sort their particular item at the same time. And what this machine does is make sure that only one instance of each item type is being sorted at a given time. Because you can imagine, if we fill up this machine with shulker boxes filled with items and start unloading those shulker boxes into the water streams which distribute the items around the storage into all of these item filters, if we unload the items into the water streams faster than the item filters can handle them, then the items will overflow and not be sorted properly. And this simple proposition gives rise to the entire field of parallel entity item sorting in Storage Tech. In fact, my very first video about Storage Tech covered the design and development of a parallel entity item sorter, but then a bunch of really smart people worked for a very long time to make this machine, and I talked a lot about this machine in a previous video about Minecraft simple storages. In that video I also touched on this machine, which was going to be used in Wavetech's main storage. In fact, this was the original parallel entity item sorter that we built on the storage in survival, but unfortunately things did not work out very well. And to understand why, we're going to need to talk about how this machine actually works. So the basic premise of the parallel entity item sorting is that I have some boxes filled with items that I want to sort. Some boxes have similar items whilst other boxes have completely different items. All I want to do is make sure that each one of these boxes has only one item type being unloaded. So for example, I can't have 2 boxes containing the same items being unloaded at the same time. However, if every one of these boxes has different items, then I can unload them all at the same time. A very smart person by the name of Boyan came up with a very ingenious way to actually do this. His idea involved using a set. What you would do, you would input your shulker boxes into the machine. And what it will do is it will take the first item that it can find out of the shulker box, add it to a set, and then it will start unloading that shulker box. If another shulker box comes along with that same item in the first slot, that box gets rejected. When that box finishes being unloaded, all we do is take out the last item that was unloaded from that box and then use that to pull this item out of the set, and now it's ready to accept another box containing the same item. This ensures that you only have one instance of a particular item being unloaded at any given time, but it also allows multiple items to be unloaded at the same time, effectively parallelizing the sorting speed of all of the different item types. There we go, we've got all of our different item types coming into our water stream at the same time. And this is a brilliant parallel entity item sorter for any storage that for you to just slap on and sort items in parallel. But unfortunately, Wavetech's main storage isn't any storage. Wavetech's main storage includes these double speed item filters, which can sort items at twice the speed of a conventional storage. And unfortunately, this is where Boyan's approach falls short, because once an item is added to his set, all you can do is verify that that item is in the set. You can't actually verify the amount of that item in the set. And then how do you differentiate between item types that you can sort at 2 times speed and item types that can only be sorted at 1 times speed? So unfortunately, Boyan's approach just was not good enough for my needs. So I had to design my own system. My idea was to literally do the opposite of what Boyan does. So what Boyan does is have an empty set that items get added to, and so my approach was to make a full set that items get removed from. And so every time you go to unload a shulker box with a particular item in the first accessible slot, you take that item, use that item to then remove an item from the set, unload the shulker box, and then, only then, do we put the item back in the set so another box can take up its slot. This idea worked really well in theory, but then the nightmare began. You see, my original design had this extremely ugly dropper spam that would make horrible clicking noises every time it ran, and its entire purpose was to take items from this first item unloader array, which I might have just stolen from Boyan's first item unloader, and then brute force these items until they find the first available slot in the set. But it turns out there was a big problem with this layout. You see, in a recent video about making a redstone shop box maker, we learned that you can backfill the slots of a shulker box to a predetermined fill level for each slot by simply backfilling the shulker box by removing dummy items like so. Well, interestingly, it turns out that in the parallel entity item sorter approach that I designed, this mechanic actually works against us. Let's say, for example, we input 2 shulker boxes of stone, like so. So now we have removed 2 stone from the set, and so no more boxes of stone can make their way to the unloader array. If we then start unloading a box of acacia logs, and then the acacia logs finish before any of the stone boxes, the acacia log gets put back into this slot right here, and now when the stone comes back, it can't go back into this chest. So where does the stone go? Well, it drifts all the way down the set, all the way down until it can find another available slot. And now our stone has moved all the way down here. And the worst part is, if we go to sort the log again, and then another item comes along and occupies its slot, now we're in a situation where these two acacia logs can actually get separated into completely different chests. This is known as set drift, and it is very bad. This problem has caused me to scream internally as I've been trying to fix it for the past 2 months. The fix that is currently on Wavetech's main storage in survival is the addition of this multi-item sorter, which forces each item type to go to a very specific chest. And this was extremely irritating because I had to go ahead and gather even more examples of these items to put into the multi-item sorter than what was already in the set. Oh, and what made it even worse is that any case where we had items being sorted at 2 times speed, I needed to leave empty slots in case items drifted into different slots. This problem of set drift has effectively completely killed the idea of using an inverse set. This problem of set drift is extremely apparent if you have a look at the set on the Wavetech server, where we have this ugly mess of items going all over the place in the same inventory. Like, just look at this, it's just, kills my insides. To finally put all of this anger and frustration to rest, I decided to listen to a suggestion given to me by Glotz, which was to take my approach of using the inverse set and essentially invert it once more, and instead of removing items from the set to assign items, I would add items to a pre-existing set until no more items could be added, and that would dictate when we could stop sorting items. And this is finally a valid solution for a variable parallel entity item sorter which can sort boxes at a speed that you can dictate simply by adjusting the amount of that item in the set. As it stands, I will not be replacing Wavetech's current parallel entity item sorter with this new design. However, I will include a schematic of the new system in the description down below. So with all of that out of the way, we can now focus on the Shulker Box distribution system. This came from a very simple idea. I wanted to change the primary color of Shulker Boxes on Wavetech from white to grey, as well as using other colors for other very specific tasks like the black boxes for those underfloor displays, yellow boxes for the item sorting, as well as purple boxes for the instackables. Oh, and if you're wondering what this is, this used to be the supply of red shulker boxes to a redstone box maker, which we decided to discard from the storage design early on in the design. However, I kept the distribution system here just because it could be useful in the future. And with the mere suggestion of organizing the way that Wavetech uses different colors of shulker boxes, got me laughed at pretty hard. After all, white shulker boxes were absolutely prolific around the Wavetech server already, and a lot of the time, people were just too lazy to even bother dyeing them in the first place, giving us lots of the regular ugly color. So, players on the Wavetech server believed that there was no way in hell that any machine would force them into one uniform color across the entire server. But this main storage had another thing coming. This all begins with the Shulker Box color sorter, which automatically organizes all the shulker boxes by their color into these storages, which will then cache all the boxes, and once one of these is full, it will stack the boxes together by dispensing them into this cauldron. I can demonstrate that quickly. There we go, this is full now. And then it will stack up all these purple shulker boxes together like so. And once they're all stacked together in entity form, they get dropped into these hoppers, which can hold the stacks, or redistribute them into this system, where the player can stack them manually by simply interacting with them. Underneath the storage for the different shulker box colors, we then have the logic for the shulker box distribution system. And this was surprisingly complicated to make, because you're talking about a remote system such as this underfloor box display, where if I go ahead and just take out all the boxes from it, it will then send a signal all the way around the storage, all the way to the shulker box request system, and as you can see, it's already sending a stack of black shulker boxes into this distribution system to refill that exact box display that we took the boxes out of. With the ability for many remote systems to tap into a universal shulker supply system, we can effectively force Wavetech members to our will. Nobody escapes the Shulker Inquisition. I know this video is getting pretty long already, but there's just one last really cool thing I need to show you. Earlier on, I touched on the chunk loading in the nether side. Well, you might notice that the chunk loading in the overworld side is all the way up there. However, all the systems that need to use the chunk loading are all the way down here. So you might ask, how on earth is the main storage communicating with the chunk loader when it needs to be on? Well, if you're a regular viewer of my channel, you might know that wireless redstone exists and it can hurt you. Okay, maybe I was lying about that second part, but still, this is so cool. Like, watch this. If I punch this note block, this will trigger a transmitter. This one in particular activates whenever an item goes through this dropper line into the sorting system. So this sort of preemptively charges up the chunk loading grid to make sure that it's running by the time items start getting sorted. Let's go ahead and punch this note block. If we go all the way up here, we might be able to catch... There we go. The receiver has received the signal, and now the chunk loading is active. And an added bonus is that we can even make the beacon dance to indicate that the chunk loading is active. Isn't that awesome? But do keep in mind that the addition of a chunk loading grid to a storage system also comes with the requirement to chunk load your system. This storage isn't particularly fussy about the exact alignment. We want to make sure that the center of the storage is approximately in the center of a chunk. But you might ask, Cubic, why are you giving me tips for how to build your storage? And you might be right. I don't know who would be insane enough to try and build this in survival. After all, it took several skilled technical players several weeks to fully complete this. And big disclaimer, I've had to fix the thing several times already. However, I should point out that these failures were entirely due to the entire system being unloaded while I was running due to the server literally restarting. The parallel entity item sorter in particular is extremely fussy about being unloaded while it's running. And this is just an unfortunate truth. Big redstone machines break easily if you unload them while they're running. So don't use mine or anybody else's storage design for that matter, unless you're prepared to crawl for its guts and fix it when things go wrong. If only I could tell you about the amount of times I had to crawl through here and check through every one of these chests to make sure that all the items are still in there. The scary warnings aside, this storage is still perfect for what Wavetech needs as a technical server and will serve us greatly in the future. I will be posting a world download to the storage and its breakdown down in the description, so you can go take a gander yourself, take notes, and maybe learn something about storage tech yourself. And before I go, I think there's one more thing that needs to be cleared up. That's right, the chest monster from the Shulker Farm build, where we first introduced the main storage project, is still here waiting to be sorted. And finally, justice is served. Begone, foul chest monster. And with that saga concluded, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.